Yesterday, USA Gymnasts presented harrowing testimony on Capitol Hill in the congressional hearings on the FBI's botched handling of Larry Nassar's sexual assault allegations.
They had legal, legitimate evidence of child abuse and did nothing.
I felt pressured by the FBI to consent to Nassar's plea deal.
I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system.
Why? Why would the FBI agents lie to OIG investigators?
The former national team doctor is now serving up to 175 years in prison after hundreds of women and girls said he abused them for decades. FBI Director Christopher Wray had this to say of the agency's mishandling of the abuse investigations.
I want to be crystal clear. The actions and inaction of the FBI employees detailed in this report are totally unacceptable. These individuals betrayed the core duty that they have of protecting people. They failed to protect young women and girls from abuse. And the work we do certainly is often complicated and uncertain, and we're never going to be perfect, but the kinds of fundamental errors that were made in this case in 2015 and 16 should never have happened, period.
Co-host of the Useful Idiots podcast, Katie Halper, is here to discuss. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So these gymnasts, they're wanting real accountability. I mean, they're you know, this whole, well, we're sorry, we botched it, we'll do better from here on out is not really what they're looking for. They want people carted in and held accountable. Is there any chance of that actually happening? What do you think?
I mean, I think that it's so, first of all, it's so outrageous, the treatment of them, and the fact that the FBI was so irresponsible and negligent. And I think that it speaks to a larger issue we have with the media, which is that the FBI, I mean, I think this is to some people shocking, right? But I don't think it should be in terms of the way that these women and young women, girls were treated. It's disturbing, but it's also shouldn't be surprising. And I think that this country has a real problem with kind of the lionization of the quote unquote intelligence community and the FBI in particular. And I was thinking while I was watching this, how irresponsible the media has been in helping prop up these figures and prop up this institution that has a really long history of sordid activity, you know, ranging from spying on people, ranging from everything that was not just done under Hoover, but which ruined people's lives, right? I mean, this is going back in history, but they had COINTELPRO. They really targeted Martin Luther King. You can go back to the Rosenberg's case where they knew that Ethel Rosenberg's brother was lying about his sister and brother-in-law, the Rosenbergs who were executed. I'm sure I'm a lot big Rosenberg enthusiast out here, but you know, that was a terrible case. It's just an example of FBI malfeasance, and we're finding out more and more about it. Mm-hmm. But you have people who are, you know, Andrew McCabe was named a CNN correspondent. You have, you know, Malcolm X, he's not FBI, but I love this. I didn't realize this.
Malcolm Nance, I think you mean.
Malcolm Nance. Oh my God. Sorry. I was talking about COINTELPRO. They killed Malcolm. But talking about Malcolm Nance, who, thanks for that. Wow. Who was Chief Petty Officer. I just realized that was his official title, which is perfect. Chief Petty. I mean, this is a guy who is petty personified. And he still hasn't apologized, by the way, for saying, just lying, overtly lying, saying that RT had given Jill Stein a show. So Malcolm, if you're watching this, 1, sorry, I called you by the wrong name. 2, you need to apologize and clarify.
You're hitting on something really important that has been so fascinating to watch happen. I think there was historically a lot of bipartisan kind of worship of law enforcement and intelligence, but maybe even particularly from or more often from Republicans. Right. But then because Trump was idiosyncratically felt aggrieved by, and to some extent was, not probably to the extent he claimed, it was combative and viewed, you know, the deep state, the FBI, the intelligence apparatus as his enemies, that necessitated, because we can only have 2 teams and 2 sides, that necessitated everyone who was anti-Trump in order to become pro-FBI, pro-intelligence organization. ramifications leading to the exact phenomenon you were just describing of these people becoming like celebrated resistance heroes in the mainstream media, people who are liars that we shouldn't be listening to.
Yeah, I mean, and we see this as kind of similar phenomenon with George Bush, right? The question of just being anti-Trump or not Trump elevates you, or being someone who Trump like throws shade at, who's basically everyone, or lots of people, I should say. Of course, not not the Saudis or the Proud Boys, but elevates you to this level. And Mueller, we were just commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and Mueller lied about WMDs. I mean, that doesn't get talked about enough. There's actual testimony of him doing that. Video. It's on video. And I think that of course, it was interesting to watch. What was it? Like, Comey was a hero, then he was the devil, then he got sanctified again. Am I right in the chronology?
I think so. That sounds about right. So the Inspector General report that recently came out was extraordinarily damning, toward the FBI agents who investigated this, including the special agent in charge of that area. Do you think that, and it included false claims, falsifying documents, the kind of thing that the FBI entraps people for all the time. They bring people in, interrogate them, and if they catch them in something wrong, they will then charge them with lying to a federal agent, and then they will use that charge, which can carry, I think, up to 5 years, as a way to get them to then plead to whatever else they want them to plead to. So given that the FBI is now caught in its own fabrications, and that there is not a more sympathetic group than these gymnasts, and you have politicians who now have an incentive to seem that they are on the side of these gymnasts, do you think it's possible that there could be actual prosecutions, or do you think we're more likely to just see this fade from the news, and then a year from now we'll be like, oh, hey, they never actually ended up prosecuting anybody for that?
Right. I mean, I think it could go either way. I'm curious what your guys' predictions would be, but I do have to say that it's incredible, and we have to remember that their inaction led to abuse.
70 women, or girls, 70 girls were abused between the time that the FBI knew that this was happening and when it was finally stopped.
Yeah, which speaks to something that's just it's so incredibly hideous. I think that just pausing and remembering that, that's 70 lives ruined because the FBI decided not to do anything and decided to treat these, especially Michaela, as a kind of like a nuisance. And when they asked her during her testimony, she says that after she told her story, they said something like, "Is that all? Is that it?" I mean, it speaks to a real, corruption that, again, shouldn't be surprising, but is still damning from the FBI. And also a real, and I think this word can get thrown around a lot, but a real misogyny that allows these women to be kind of expendable and disposable, and somehow this doesn't matter. And the fact that they didn't use their power, it's like the one time the FBI doesn't abuse their power, they don't do anything with their power. They're constantly overstepping, overreaching, abusing their power. And now this time they don't even do the bare minimum to actually
they can whip up a prosecution against anyone. They can. I mean, most recently reading through the whole Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping thing, right? Their heavy role in sort of making that happen. But here they're like, no, can't do anything.
Yeah, now they have on their kid gloves. It makes no sense. I mean, it's so sordid and dark. And again, they should be held responsible for this. And of course, we have to make sure that these things are systemic, though, not just symbolic, because you could imagine something symbolic happening that doesn't really change the culture. And then, this is why, and people wonder why more women don't report, or men for that matter, or, young men, boys, girls, because it's all over, sadly, sexual assault and rape and abuse. But, this is just example, 5,000 in the last minute, where you see why people are de-incentivized from coming forward.
Well, it's not like there was a lack of evidence. There were so many women willing to talk about this. This wasn't like a dispute between just two people where it's hard to weigh the relative testimony.
Right. right?
Yeah.
It was so many. And they also, what was really disgusting about this is one of the FBI agents, the one that actually was questioning, saying, oh, is that all? After she says, he basically assaulted me. And he says, oh, that's all. That was a phone interview, by the way. Didn't even have didn't even go and conduct an in-person interview. And then on top of it, apparently one of the FBI agents was being potentially offered a job. And so there was, looking out for their own best interests and potentially a lucrative payday afterwards. But they sat on this investigation essentially for 3 years, which is why Larry Nassar was able to abuse 70 more girls. They knew about this. They sat on it. They were looking out for their own futures. So it's just, but really the way they treated the victims, the line of questioning was so inappropriate to make them feel like they were the perpetrators, or that they were lying, and then the way they one question that really was, disgusting, was one of the investigators saying, well, did the treatment work? After she was assaulted.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And did it work? What in the world?
I know. Well, apparently he claimed that it did. But yeah, it's like, digital rape, basically. They're asking if that helped with their treatment. It's like he penetrated her with his fingers during an exam.
And that's supposed to be some sort of a treatment that is supposed to help their performance or something. And then they ask, well, but did it?
So disgusting. I know, it's so disgusting. And I guess it really reminds me of how much we need to remember this, because this isn't someone like, shuffling through the mail in the mailroom, right? These are high up people in the FBI. And we have to remember this whenever we hear someone from the FBI or from the intelligence community or from the military or any of these kind of sociopathic organizations. We have to remember that this is systemic and endemic, and this is not an exception. This is just one that we happen to hear about. Just imagine all the stuff that we never hear about in terms of entrapment, all these stories that never see the light of day. This is a story where 70 women were abused, but 20 years after 9/11, like how many Muslims have been basically disappeared, have had their human rights violations, their human rights violated. It's stunning, and it doesn't get talked about. And the fact that the FBI is celebrated, the fact that Bush is celebrated still. Again, guys, we need to have a mind that understands that not being anti-Trump or being hated by Trump does not make you a resistance hero. It does if it's resistance TM, like Blue MAGA. But we need to have a mind that allows for, like you were saying, more than two teams. And it really is disturbing. And it's reduced the world to just black and white, good and bad. And it brings a lot of really, really, really bad people into the allegedly good side. And that's not a good thing either.
Yeah,
well, and it seems like all you have to do to rehab your image, right? if you're an enemy to the people, then all you have to do is just take the right side, and then suddenly you're
Trump.
A hero.
Yeah, I'm sure the people of Iraq would have a difference of opinion with that, but when it comes to Bush especially,
Yes, they might. Well said, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will have more Rising for you right after this.